this record button. So welcome to Coaches Coaching. I'm RJ Rice, for those that don't know me, Director of Fitness Training at Bossa Fitness. And we have got a very special guest. I'm very excited about this particular one. I'm going to have Nick introduce him. But his name is Brett Bartholomew, author of Conscious Coaching. But Nick, I'll turn the time over to you to introduce him, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm just going to give you a quick little introduction to Brett. He's just a strength and conditioning coach, consultant of an educational program right now that's called Bought In. And I'm enjoying that a ton. An author of one of my new favorite books, Coaching, The Art and Science of Building Buy-In. So welcome. Thanks for jumping on with our coaches and
my pleasure.
Being able to be here and some time with us. Could you do me a favor and just kind of introduce yourself a little bit more, what's your background, what's your story?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. I don't want to bug anybody. So if anybody wants me to go into more detail, I'll be happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll just kind of hit the Reader's Digest points. Okay. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska originally. So I grew up kind of under the shadow of, if anybody's a American football fan, I don't know if we have international folks on the line, so I'm trying to be respectful to that. But kind of Boyd Epley and strength and conditioning and Husker Power and all that.
Sorry, Utah and Colorado.
There we go. Perfect. Thanks for the context. Okay. So grew up kind of under the strength and conditioning umbrella. Like many of you, I'm sure I always liked training. So I'd gotten into bodybuilding and just fitness stuff early on, which later, after I went and got my exercise science degree at Kansas State University, really became evident that, I wanted to get into more formal strength and conditioning. I liked the science-based nature of it. I, as a former athlete myself, somebody who boxed competitively, I did Golden Gloves. I played football. I played baseball. I trained fighters at one point in time in exchange for my training because I was a broke college kid. And so that's how I really got into training athletes, is training other fighters as I continue to increase my knowledge there. After undergraduate, I went and did an internship with Athletes Performance, now Exos. So did that down in Pensacola, Florida, worked with everything from pro baseball, military, youth, high school, what have you. Then I knew I wanted experience in a team setting as well. So I went back and worked with the University of Nebraska with their football team, and then got my master's at Southern Illinois University because an opportunity had presented itself where essentially I could get my master's paid for while serving as the head strength coach for 8 Olympic sports. So including men's and women's tennis, swimming and diving, golf, baseball, and then I would also assist with football and basketball as well. After that time, went back to Athletes Performance as a full-time coach in the Pensacola location. So 90% of my job was day-to-day coaching. The other 10% was going to different military bases across the world and helping them understand how to train a bit more intelligently, because we had just signed a large contract with the United States Special Forces to try to get guys to, extend their career longevity window. Because as you guys can imagine, all of these very extreme people in our military and our special forces wanted to train in extreme ways. They just felt like that was the only way they could prepare for what was overseas. So you had guys that had tons of knowledge of, the battlefield, but they were broken by the time they really got to use it or teach it to other people. So it was a bit of an awkward but awesome part of my life, because at 25, imagine me with no beard being shuttled out to a Navy SEAL base trying to tell these guys how to train. And that was an interesting time, because it teaches you a lot about, I remember the first time I get up there and just start nerding out, because you talk for 4 hours, you'd give 4 hours worth of presentations, and then you'd coach them for 4 hours. So it would always go lecture, practical, lecture, practical, lecture, practical. And, when you get in a room of us, we want to talk about the nerd part of training, all the interesting pieces. All they want to know is, how can I do this overseas? How is recovery supposed to help me when, I got to be ready to go all the time? It was a rude awakening, because you just realize that your knowledge of your craft isn't enough. You need to know a lot about people. I think that was also sparked early on. I mean, my master's degree is in attentional focus, which again, I'm just going to start blank slate. So I don't want to offend anybody if you're familiar with this already. But I just kind of felt like, it's great if we can write fantastic programs, but we got to get our athletes to learn about it. And if all of us were in a room right now when we were going to work out, and let's say we're doing 5x5, all of us know intuitively the effort we need to put in that session, right? We enjoy training, we enjoy strain, but not all of our athletes or clients do. So I wanted to learn the influence, motivational psychology piece of it as well. So my master's degree focused on cueing specifically. So what you say matters, the types of cues that you give, and the actions that it can elicit. But after a while, that really wasn't enough for me. I wanted to know, okay, well, why does this happen? If I give somebody an outcome-based cue or a metaphor, why do they tend to perform better, not only in terms of the outcome-based measure, but why do we see differences in EMG activity and what's going on in the brain? That took me down a deep rabbit hole of human nature. I studied that stuff voraciously for about the past 6 years. I was at Exos from 2010 to 2016, and during that time, ran their whole pro sports side. So not combine or pro day, but guys that were actually currently in the NBA, MLB, NFL, UFC, all those pieces. And I started to like that, not because of the acronym, and I could say, I'm training pro athletes. I liked it because what do we know people that make millions of dollars and are the best at what they do have? They have a large ego, right? And it made coaching more interesting to me when I didn't just have to solve physical problems, those related to movement quality and strength and conditioning or fitness, but also psychological problems. Like, how do I deal with difficult athletes? And I don't know. Yeah, it was just an interest that took over from there because people would send me difficult athletes. NFL coaches would say, I got a guy, he's never trained in the off season. Basically he's your problem now. And I really enjoyed that stuff. And it made me feel good to hopefully help them in return and give them an athlete that, hopefully had changed for the better. So after leaving Exos, I was talking about it briefly. I went and did a 1-year venture in LA. And then my wife and I decided it was time to kind of roll the dice and do our own thing. Because honestly, guys, I kept running into circumstances where, certain jobs were offered. There were certain opportunities, but they wanted me to choose between the book and taking that job. So there were about 3 offers on the line within the past 18 months, but they said no more speaking about the book, no courses, no conference stuff, just this job. And my wife and I didn't feel like that was the right thing to do after putting 3 years of my life into something like that. So we're in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm doing my own thing now and trying to figure it out as I go.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. So let me ask you on conscious coaching. A lot of our coaches have read it. Some of our coaches have not. Can you give a 30-second elevator pitch on why you think it would be important for them to read it and what it's about?
100%. Yeah. Coach development is a 360-degree thing, right? You need to know how to program. You need to understand nutrition. You need to understand movement. We need to know biomechanics, physiology, all that. But you also need to know communication. The reason this book was written is because communication has often been put into this like leadership, sing-songy, guru, we are the world, let's everybody be compassionate and be friends kind of shit. And that bugged me. It's really about conflict management. It's about influence, persuasion, and how to get people to do things that sometimes they don't want to do. And I wanted to formalize that a little bit. So the book is just the beginning of that conversation. You'll never, ever, ever hear me say that or any other part of my work is the sole answer. But it was kind of a wake-up call of me saying, hey, we always talk about training. Why are we not talking about communication when coaching is a social-based activity? So that's kind of where that starts off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Nick, you had a question?
Yeah, just, following up with that, what's the conscious coach in your eyes?
Could you repeat that? Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
What makes a conscious coach or a leader, for that matter, in your eyes?
Yeah, I think somebody that just thinks big picture, but still focuses on the small details. It concerns me right now that we still have coaches arguing over what's better, a front squat or a back squat, and they don't understand that answer is contextual. It depends on the individual, the client, what they have going on. It bugs me that program out there that is going to be right for everybody. It bugs me that just are so on either side of the pendulum with things For me, conscious coaching sits in the middle. It understands that the right answer is always going to depend on the individual. And it's also somebody that studies, again, the communication and social element just as much as they do training. I mean, I know online training is a big thing right now, and it's part of one of my businesses, we do it. But you are always going to have to deal with people in our industry. And so, the day that coaching isn't done face-to-face or person-to-person, then by all means, don't worry about this stuff. But why would we not study communication? So conscious coaches kind of understand it was my way of saying, Nick, I don't ever believe any of us are like ever a master. I think any of us could train 12 Olympians, fitness models, Golden Globe winners, whatever, but like nobody's a master in our field. There's always something that is going to make you go back to the drawing board. So I just use the term conscious coach of saying like, you may not be a master, but hopefully you have a bigger picture awareness and a balanced perspective that you can apply.
I love that you always talk on that chasing mastery, but you'll never be a master of your craft.
It's just true, right? Like I think no matter how we want to market ourselves, that's the fun part of our job. You'll laugh at me for this, but I listen to all kinds of music. So I'll state that first and foremost. But the one artist that's always resonated with me throughout my career has been Eminem, because the guy is always fiercely competitive with himself and just says like, I want to find as many ways as I can to take a rhyme and twist it, bend it. He's never satisfied with his own work. And I just think that that's a perfect muse for coaching. Like coaching, you need to be competitive with yourself and just realize that, there's always something to be done. I don't think for 1 minute, because I wrote a book and have a course that I have all my athletes figured out. It's just, we need to have the discussion,
So you always speak on like being an impactful leader. You first have to know yourself, and then you get to know your clients. You can speak a little on that.
Sure. Yeah. Now I have a fighting background, so this is going to be where this analogy comes from, or metaphor. I think it's hard to win a fight if you've never tasted your own blood. And I think that, if you want to be a great coach, but you're not absolutely ruthless with self-criticism and understanding, first of all, your coaching identity, meaning specifically, what do you view as your predominant coaching style? Why is that your predominant coaching style? Asking yourself, does that change based on the situation? And if so, how? What does that look like? Just going through this rigorous, what I talk about in the book, that 3 stages of self-identification process. I don't get how you think that you can lead other people, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, and I'll speak to primarily strength and conditioning here just because it's been my background. I've always heard coaches bitch about, oh, my athlete won't do this. They're lazy, they're soft. I'm like, well, dude, like you address them all in the exact same way. And I'm not saying you need to bring them in and like have a Dr. Phil moment, but do all of you talk to your girlfriends, wives, coworkers, family? Like you don't talk to everybody the same way. You can be the same person, but you change and alter that message, right? Whether it's vocal tone, how fast you're speaking, the words and language that you use, all those pieces. And so I just think coaches have to have a really clear idea of what that is for them. Because otherwise, let's say you have a bad session, right? Let's say you have a miscommunication. How can you go back and reverse engineer the process if you're not first familiar with yourself? You're the lead, you're the key social agent in behavior change. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. I mean, we always talk about like being an adaptable strength and conditioning. It's also in personality, right? It's not just in movement to adapt. It's also in personality and emotion.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's funny. When I first met Kelly Starrett, he came up to me and he was like, hey, tell me a little bit more about what you're doing. And exactly like what you said, Nick, I go, Kelly, what you're trying to do for cleaning up movement, I'm trying to do for cleaning up communication, the bottom line, so I guess if I had a 10-second elevator pitch for it, it would be that. But I just think, listen, there's a reason. And this really bugged me one time. Somebody, and of course it was a sports scientist, he goes, I think communication is far easier to learn than training. And I said, well, I respect your opinion, but if that was the case, then we might as well tell every sociology, psychology, behavioral economics, all these different departments within major universities across the globe just to shut down. You know what I mean? And then you have people like Daniel Kahneman, who's won a Nobel Prize for behavioral economics. You have Richard Thaler, who earlier this year or last year won a Nobel Prize for behavioral economics and choice theory. Like we've got to understand people. I mean, we live in the social nature of the world that we live in now just amplifies that need. You guys think that, like, look at all the advertising and the marketing, all the analytics and everything that's captured on us. People know how to market to us, speak to us, and address our subconscious. So why would we not be learning that same thing? I have an athlete right now, and I don't mean to go on a tangent, but I have an athlete right now. His name's LaShawn McCoy. He's the running back for the Buffalo Bills. Now, LaShawn is notorious for not training during the NFL offseason. Like, the guy, like, everybody almost kind of laughs about it, that he's one of the best running backs in the league, yet almost never trains in the offseason. Well, we've got him to show up for 12 sessions, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but you guys know, like, if you take a client, no matter what their goal is, the first thing is just get them to show up. Like, consistency, simplicity, get them to show up. And, I asked LaShawn, I go, why don't you work out in the offseason? And he goes, you be honest? He goes, I don't like strength coaches. And I sat there for a minute. I go, well, why not? He goes, because all of you think you know everything. You never listen to any of us. And he just kept going on and on and on and on. He's like, you're a bunch of meatheads. Like, you don't understand sport. And I go, well, tell me about some of those experiences that you've had, because we had just started working together. I go, tell me a little bit more about that. So he starts giving me examples. So now I know how to alter my message around LaShawn McCoy. You know what I mean? I don't change it up. I don't cater to him. I just make sure that, he understands things at a different beat than maybe a kid from rural Iowa who just wants to squat 405 every day because he loves training. You can't talk to those guys the same way.
Love that. Hey, I've got a question for you, Brett.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes from your book that just really stood out to me, it said people disagree with one another because they perceive their goals and values are incompatible. This all comes back to building buy-in and trust. We don't communicate our values and beliefs as coaches and leaders to our athletes, then the bridge we intend to use to connect with them will be built on an unstable foundation, and important questions will go unanswered. So I think we've been talking about, how you self-reflect and understand, how do you, take that into application and communicate those values and beliefs of what's important to you as a coach to your athletes, to your clients.
Lane, it's Lane, right?
Yeah, Lane. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, and I'm going to repeat it back to you to make sure that I answer this, because I always hate when I ask a question and somebody doesn't answer it but goes off on a tangent. So you're saying, how do I communicate my values early in the process to a client or athlete to make sure we start off on the right page?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll give you a recent example. So I joined a group the other day. When I say our group, I'm in the midst of NFL offseason training. This is kind of my busiest time of year. January through March and July are really busy with football, and these guys can join at any time, right? And so I brought a guy in yesterday with this. And, I just say, hey, this is kind of how I coach. This is what, take day one slowly. Let me know if you have any questions. One thing that's important to me as a coach is that you understand everything that's going on. And then I let them know, I go, I was an athlete at one point in time too. I know what it's like to be told what to do without having a reason. I go, I'm never above you asking why. I'm never above you challenging me. I go, but at the same time, you're not going to run the show and I'm going to hold you accountable. And I smile when I do that, right? So they know that they're not being talked at, they're being talked to. And these guys want that. They want that accountability. So I try to just spend no more than 5 minutes early on really laying out the expectations for them so that there's no miscommunications. I let them know that I want to know how you'd like to be coached. I'll always blend some things that you feel have worked really well for you in the past with things that I know are going to work well based on the research or my past experience. The number one thing, Lane, that I let them know early on, and probably the biggest key term that I use, is I let them know, I say, this is a partnership. I don't work for you and you don't work for me. It's a partnership. We work together, and we've got to make sure that we, keep that in mind as we go throughout this. And then after that, what I try to do, especially on that first day and that first week, is really use that kind of 3R method I talk about in the book: research, relate, and reframe. I'll always kind of ask them questions about previous experiences, their background, their upbringing, coaches or trainers that they were. Then I try to relate some of my personal experiences with that. either when I was an athlete or as a coach or what have you. And then I try to reframe everything in that light. So I really think leaning on that 3R model can help quite a bit too, because then you're observing, you're applying by letting them know and communicating your values, but then you're also adapting by reframing that message, and it becomes a 360-degree loop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. That's very good.
And I think one thing that was tough for me, just to, go on a little bit longer, is, the part of the book that people seem to gravitate to really quickly was the archetypes. And I get it, it's interesting, it's unique. But the problem is they missed a lot of the 3 stages of identification, or the 3R method. They missed some of those things that there's a reason the book was structured the way it was. Like, you have to know yourself before you know the other stuff. And the archetypes, I say it in the book, those are just general models, right? Like, I think we'd all agree that how our athletes or clients are in one setting is not necessarily how they may be in another setting, right? Like, nobody's just one archetype, and nobody's one archetype all the time, And so it's something I'm still trying to dig myself out of, to be honest with you, because I'm trying to figure out how people think, to the point of how come so many people gravitated to the archetypes. So I get that it's new, but think of a tendency that coaches have. We like to try to reductionize. We like to try to put things in a reductionist menu, meaning, if we want to run a warm up, we know that we've got to hit thoracic spine. We know we've got to hit the hips. We know we need to hit, we know certain parts of the body we really need to focus on with mobility and stability. Same thing with training. If we want fat loss, we need to understand the differences between when it's right to do more of a hypertrophic based program, more metabolic in nature, maybe even aspects of max strength or power, just so we can undulate their periodization in accordance. So people want to do the same thing with personality. They want to take something. They'd love for me to write a book. They'd love for me to write a book that says, this is how you coach each athlete all the time, regardless of circumstance. Just follow this book. That will never exist, right? And that's something that's even I struggle with studying this stuff, because there's never going to be an answer. So in the course, Nick, I'm speaking, Nick, like because you said you're taking the course right now.
Yeah.
Nick?
Yeah,
okay. That's why in the course, I wanted to make sure that I address, all right, what else is in play here? Well, we talked about drives. We talked about environment. And of course, that can be physical environment, perceived environment, whatever. And then social agents. So parents, significant others, coaches, other people in their lives, social media, all those things. So the goal is to kind of just build this awareness of saying we can't be effective at any of this if we don't know how can I prepare for the weather if I don't know what influences cold fronts and climates and all that, right? Like, I need to know what change may be coming so that we can make sure we're adequately prepared for a storm if it comes. So I hope that answers your question, but I'd say that's the biggest piece that I lean on.
Well, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Great question.
So, go kind of working off of that. Like, when you're going into, obviously, you were just talking about hey, expectations at the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
But even after you've had a client for a long time or an athlete, what do you do to kind of start off that session to know where their mind's at and how you need to coach them?
Yeah. So, I always want to use the most recent example possible, because it just helps kind of bring it to life as opposed to speak to it in esoteric kind of terms. So, there's one guy I'm working with now. We've worked together off and on for the past 4 years. And when he comes in, he usually shows up earlier than everybody else. I just try to have a chat with him. The first thing I say is always informal, because I want him to drop his guard a little bit. Nobody wants to arrive on the scene and start getting pestered with super fucking serious questions, pardon my language. So when he comes in, I try to keep it, I'm just I'll either joke with him, I'll make fun of him a little bit in kind of a playful, locker room way, or I'll just kind of ask him a question. He's just got this guy just got a new dog. So I'll ask him about his dog, whatever. And then, I'll start to lead into just some more formal questions, like, how you feeling today? What'd you think of yesterday's session? Did you have any questions about that? He's got recurring knee issues. Oh God, my computer's trying to restart. Let me tell it to not do that. He's got all kinds of recurring knee issues. So I'll just ask him little things around that stuff. And then the biggest thing I do is watch them all during warm up. I know that we're going to have a good day if guys are kind of chatting and joking around and jabbing around, kind of the warm up period. But yeah, just starting, I think the biggest thing, if I were to give you one tip, it's start informal. Bring them down, like welcome them into the session a little bit, right? It's kind of like a simple good morning. I'm from the Midwest. I'm raised to never call somebody in the morning without saying good morning. Like it's just those little kind of warmth pieces that can bring, and keep in mind also, one of the biggest things that people want, no matter how educated we are, no matter how refined we think ourselves to be, people want validation, so they just want to be recognized. They want you to pay attention to them, and they want to talk about things that matter to them. And so if you can get them opening up about stuff that they care about first, they're more likely to give you good information later on about what you care about and what you need from them, because they feel validated. They feel acknowledged, and they don't feel like it's a transactional relationship. I think that's where, again, I have to draw a line here, though, and I'll talk about it when I come out there. I'm not talking about being warm and empathetic and, you know what I mean? I'm not talking about coddling them. I'm just talking about be a human being and understand that, how would you want somebody to address you straight off the bat? You want them to come out and be like, hey, Nick, how you feeling? Great, because today we're going after this. Like, probably not the best for everybody. Some clients will be fine with that, some not,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you're kind of just like you said, you're treating them like a human before you even get rolling the lot, right? Just by what they're answering.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not that great. So one of the lectures I'll be giving when I'm out there, I'll be talking the opposite of warmth and empathy can really be effective. Sometimes you need to be really hard-nosed. Sometimes you need to can you guys still hear me? Sorry, I'm getting internet connection issues. Are you good on your end?
It's good now.
Yeah, now I am.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So anyway, there's sometimes where I'm a bit hard-nosed. I had a guy last week that really gave a bullshit effort, the past 3 days. And I saw him walking. He was about 100 yards away. And when he got closer and closer, right when he was about 50 yards, I go, hey, if you're going to bring the same effort as yesterday, turn your ass back and walk around. And I was serious. I was just like, I'm not joking. Like, make sure that you're not wasting your time and your money, because I'm not doing you any good if you're just going to come and go through the motions again. And he responds well to that. That's not for everybody. But I'm just saying, like, coaches don't have to be, you shouldn't be a waiter. You should be a teacher. A waiter always wants to know, hey, is the food okay? Is it too cold? Can I bring anything else? Right? A teacher is there to guide you and help you, but there's also set expectations and things like that, right? There's accountability there, and they let you know that. And I think the best coaches really know how to be more of a teacher and a guide than they do a waiter, because some people just think if I'm, so warm and soft and kind of, oh, what do you need? And we're in a service industry. I get it. That's how I get paid too. But you're not always going to get the best response from people like that. So sometimes you need to know how to flip the switch and be a little bit more of a dick.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the example that I'm thinking of is Boyle talking about shit and ice cream. Life is a little bit of shit, and life is a little bit of shit and a little bit of ice cream. And you got, some people have had a lot of shit in their life. You got to give those people a little more ice cream, and the people that have had a lot of ice cream, you got to get a little more shit. But your great point as far as sometimes it's, hey, get your ass in there, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, you got to. And one thing I'll want your guys' feedback on when I get out there is if I ever, and really you're the only group I've really talked to about this, if I were to ever write another book, it would be on kind of dark-sided leadership traits in coaching, just kind of this myth of empathy and how, sometimes we have to embrace some of those other aspects to be effective leaders, because I don't think that's out there much. I think that we're inundated with texts on productivity and positive thinking and even meditation and mindfulness. But what about the real shit? What about the stuff that deals with sometimes when you have to be that other side of yourself? Because the research is there. I mean, if you've taken the course and you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, where it talks about psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism. And of course, we're talking about subclinical levels of this. We're not saying it's good to be a narcissist. We're not saying it's good to be a psychopath. We're just talking about the traits that are literally, it's shown in the literature that you have to be, just like training, right? There's volumes and intensities. You have to be willing to tap into other spectrums of your personality if you hope to lead people effectively. So,
sorry, but to go back to your point of, when you were talking about going out and training the SEALs, and you basically had cold water splashed right in your face. And from that, right, this whole thing has kind of been born, right? But you look at a lot of people, whenever you at least my experience, whenever I see people with, especially people of huge success, most of the time there was a very dark time, and there was some bad shit going on, and from that they did whatever, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're completely right in that assertion, and that's why I always say, if there's one thing worth writing down, probably while I'm on here, it's the phrase "talent needs trauma." Like, really, it does. Like, talent needs trauma, whatever that trauma means, right? Like, I'm not saying like you need to witness. Like, my brother got stabbed when I was 21 years old. Like, I'm not saying people need to witness a stabbing or a shooting, but like, you need some kind of trauma or slap in the face. I mean, it was even a slap in the face, I'll be honest with you, when I went from coaching collegiate athletes to pro athletes. Because, collegiate, if you look at a lot of college strength and conditioning coaches, it's very militant, on the whistle, yada, 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 do this, do that, do that. You can't address a team of 53 millionaires the same way. You're not going to. And plus, some of these guys are 30 years old, and then you have other parts of the group that are 24, 25. You got to be able to speak in spectrums, and you have to know how to assert yourself. I promise you, and you guys, I mean, many of you have coached for a long time, no doubt. You're at a really great place. Clients will appreciate it when you assert yourself periodically because they want to see that you're real. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's your job to create a positive environment and make sure they want to come, but it's really your job to kind of hold these guys accountable too and find that balance of speaking to them in that spectrum and not always the way that they feel like, oh, he kind of got mad at me today. Well, yeah, you didn't hold up your part of the bargain. I care about what you're doing enough to stay on you. Let's go, And so anyway, we'll get into that a lot when I come out there and speak. There's a whole on it that I'd love to get your guys' take on. What's funny is when I give the presentation, everybody slowly starts to see their lips all start to curl into a smile because people want permission to like release their dark side a little bit. You know what I mean? Because we live in this society where it's like, it's so bad. Come on.
No, that's great. Well, we want to be respectful of your time, Brett. We appreciate you taking this morning with us.
I'll take another one, guys. Questions help keep me sharp. So if you want to answer, I'll take another one. Yeah. I got a little bit before I jump on my Facebook Live group here. Perfect.
I got one.
Lane, I think you had one.
Yeah, and thanks so much, Brett. This has been great stuff. I'm really excited for you to come out here. One of the other quotes I've read from you that really stuck with me was, the starting point for all interaction must come from an understanding of what the other person cares about most.
Yeah.
And understanding, okay, and I mean, I guess it's a similar line of questioning as the other one, but essentially, how do I quickly get to what does that other person care about most so that I can establish that deep connection with whether it be clients or athletes or coworkers. I think that's such an important concept of being able to get to what the other person cares about most. What have you found in application of how you go about that process?
I listen to, again, it comes down to kind of just being a more astute observer. And sometimes it does take time, Lane. Like, yeah. I'd love to tell you I'm like the mentalist, and in 1 minute and 30 seconds, like I have everybody pegged, or like I'm Benedict Cumberbatch and Sherlock Holmes. Like you can just like lock that in. It's not always the case, but within 3 sessions, you should have a pretty clear idea. Like I know right now, like if I had a chart, and I usually do this, I haven't done it for this group though, but I'll usually have something in Excel or my notes where I'll have the person's name and what I know are some triggers for them. Like I have a guy right now that his trigger is money, because every time we compete, he literally wants to put 500 to 1,000 on it, and he literally carries a bag of money with him like he's Floyd Mayweather, and when he's around, like every time before the session starts, he's on the phone. I go, who are you talking to, man? He goes, my agent. He goes, time to get more money. And so like everything about, everything for him is money. Another guy, it's legacy. Like he really just wants to be known as somebody that did right by the game and played it well. Like he's not sure if he's going to ever make the Hall of Fame because that's not really up to him. But he's like, I just want to be known as somebody that was a good soldier and did what it took, And so he likes that kind of structure, obedience, kind of drone-like process, So I can talk to him about that. Like, hey, these next few days are going to suck, but it's part of the process. Keep your head down. Make sure you stay focused. And I'll call him Tony. Tony, this is the day that determines if you're going to get that money. Because if you don't go through this, if you don't do the max strength phase, you're increasing your risk of injury, which is going to decrease your amount of years you can play in the league and get the money that you talk about. So, you know what I mean? You just sit there and and then everybody's like, damn, like this guy kind of knows me, you know? And so listening to them and kind of baiting them with questions and sometimes acting a little dumber than you are. It's kind of like a, you know, play a fool to catch a fool kind of thing. Not that your clients or athletes are fools. What I mean is sometimes like stepping back and letting them kind of teach you, they'll show you a lot. You know, when you involve people's ego in something, you'll start to see the things that they normally keep hidden from people, you know, and that's good information to have. I don't mean that, again, that can be taken in a dark kind of seductive way. Well, let's be honest. Part of coaching is that, you know, when you're trying to alter behavior and change things, like all these things are weapons in the arsenal that you need to draw upon. What makes these things good or bad to do is dependent on the outcome you're trying to achieve. For us as coaches, we're trying to get them better, right? We're not trying to like trick them into something. So, you know, it's not a negative thing to do.
No, you're bringing up a great point, because at the end of the day, that's one of the struggles that we have is connecting the dots between okay, what does the client want versus what do they need, right? And also helping them see, okay, if we get the needs, it'll help achieve the wants, and connecting those dots not only for us as trainers but also for them as clients to be able to see, okay, yeah, if I can improve my hip mobility, that's going to help me be able to squat, deadlift more, which will be able to help me, perform on the field, which is going to help me make that money, right?
Yep, 100%. And it's just finding that for them. And for like a dad that comes in that might just want to get in better shape, sometimes it's like, hey man, what brings you in? He wants to play with his kids.
I love that active listening.
Yes, you know what I mean? Or it could, 100%. But and like most people just really don't. And I'm guilty of it too. There's some times where I'm so focused on what we need to get done with that session, I probably didn't intake as much. And that's why one thing I'll send it out in email either in the next 2 weeks or so. One thing that I'm releasing with the course, because we're kind of trickling out bonuses throughout the week, so people don't just like massively consume the course and then be like, all done. We want them to keep going. So we have a coach and session evaluation form that you guys are going to get, and that you guys can print it off, share it around, but it'll literally say, you know, we start with the session. What were the goals of the session? Were they accomplished? Why? Why were these objectives chosen? All these things that just take you down this rabbit hole. It'll ask you, what coaching style did you use with that individual or the session? Why was that chosen? How is that depicted? How are you evaluating if that coaching style was successful or not based on the way in which you used it or the person that you used it with? What was your athlete's or client's response to that? Like anything in bought in, just swap athletes with clients. You know what I mean? That it's for everybody. But it goes through like you thinking about these things like, all right, not only how did I do as a coach, but how did this session go? And, you know, what was the overall point of it? And then evaluating the client and athlete as well. You know, and the majority of the useful stuff in this course, or at least what we try to do, is the application of it. You know, I just don't think coaches have gone back and reflected on this stuff ever before. I think they've always looked at, did I get them leaner? You know, did they lose or gain weight depending on their goal? You know, in my case, did they jump higher, run faster? But what were the social outcomes of this stuff? And how can I better understand and define my process? And hopefully that's what the evaluation form and some of this stuff, if you guys go through field guides 1 and 2, the second one will be released here soon. But if you go through all that, that's the goal, is enhanced self-awareness of all those pieces.
Love that. Looking forward to it.
Awesome,
yeah, and just keep checking your guys' spam or whatever, because sometimes I think since I switched emails recently, like, you know, some guys are like, hey, I'm not getting the bonus materials or whatever, and I just tell them to check their spam. So, but feel free, I mean, print those things off, pass them out. They're for your use. All I'd ask is that when I come down there, if you could share some of the ways that you've adapted and adopted it with me, I'd really appreciate it, because I want to keep learning, and especially learning from people that are actually applying the information, because it helps me kind of get better at, you know, finding what's helpful to you guys as well.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go for it, RJ. Thank you so much for that. Just that was like one of the biggest things that I think our coaches don't do right now is literally they just get them in a session, like you said, and did I give them fitness? Did I not hurt anyone? And then they walk off. And so it's pretty interesting to think of like all the stuff that it's like, hey, I got to dig into this of did I get accomplished what I was supposed to get accomplished? And that goes into several different things, to that right? Point, it's not just about movement quality.
Right. No, 100%, RJ. And we'll whiteboard this when I come. You know, I'll tell everybody, I'm like, hey, the minute you get off the floor, like imagine you just got off the training floor, sit down and battle rap with somebody. Have a colleague say, what was the point of that session? Did you achieve it? How do you know you achieved it? What coaching style did you use? Like rapid fire, you know what I mean? We used to do this with interns when I was in the college setting. They'd come in and they'd apply, you know, give their resume and all that. I'd have them, there'd be a big whiteboard. And I go, guys, we're going to do an activity next called 3 and 5. You have to write 3 workouts on the board in 5 minutes. And I go, now here's the thing. It's general. Sometimes we'd give them a client. We'd say it's a 19-year-old baseball player, had a labral tear, whatever. It's a 330-pound client who is just starting working out for the first time, whatever. You know, we just say it's general. But whatever that was, I gave them 5 minutes to write 3 simple workouts on the whiteboard. And really, I'm not sitting there wondering like, oh, are they going to use a split squat or a goblet squat? I just, want to see that they can do it. You know, if they can do it, all right, that tells me a little something. They're thinking on the fly. They can put something up. Even if it's not a great training session, I can clean that stuff up, right? But I need these guys to think. And then 2, like I need to see how much guidance they need. Some of these guys would just, boom, grab the marker and go. Other ones would be like, wait a minute, you know, what? And ask 20 questions. I'd be like, listen, you know, we set this off. We said, the only information I'm going to give you is this. Don't overthink it. I want to see you complete the task in less than 5 minutes or less. And so you see how well does somebody take instruction? How well, you know, there's so many little things that we should be doing to constantly test ourselves because it's scary what we really actually don't know. I mean, I'll be deadly honest with you guys. The book was a manifestation of me trying to just lay all my shit out there so I could have a better understanding. Because one year I was looking for professional feedback. I wasn't getting it from my colleagues or my boss at the time. So I just asked my athletes, I go, why do you come to me? You know, and at first they're like, oh, we like the workouts. I go, yeah, but you can get good workouts a lot of places. Like, why do you come to me? Well, it's the way you talk about things and communicate. And I was like, boom, that's it. So I sat in an airport one day when I was traveling. There was a huge travel delay. And I literally just wrote down, what the F do I do as a coach? And there are things that I've always described to people, but I had never put on paper. And finally, as I started to put it on paper, it manifested itself as the book over time, you know, and that helped me a lot. So that book's almost my coaching philosophy in a nutshell, or at least the beginnings of it. There's a lot of stuff that didn't make the book because my editor told me I was a crappy writer and all that stuff, but, you know, that's to be expected.
That's not important. That's not the important stuff.
No, that's not the important. That's it. Joke's on you because that became the course and the field guide.
There you go.
And so we'll do some of that stuff if you guys are open to it when we're down there. Is, you know, I want it to be interactive. You know, I want us to like come up with like, what are the sticking points for it to work though? RJ, like people have to be really vulnerable. Like people do got to say like, I suck at this. You know what I mean? Like, what are some ways I can get better and open that up?
Well, I think most of the people, 90%, I can speak to past events we've had. Most of the people that we've had at events are very, you know, open and vulnerable. And we've got a good group that, you know, we all call each other out on each other's shit. And we all know, you know, what issues are going on and who's doing good, who's not. So it should be a good one. We'll have some fun.
I'm looking forward to it. And on a final note, guys, I got to say this, and trust me, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. That book was self-published. It was a big roll of the dice. There are a lot of people that said, oh, nobody cares about a book on the art of coaching. Oh, you know, nobody wants to hear from strength coaches on this subject. Oh, you know, whatever. And so we rolled the dice on it, took a loan, did all that. Like, so you guys supporting the book and independent authors like me really means more than you know. Like I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Like it's something that still hasn't really sunk in. So thank you for that. And as you guys go through it, all your feedback is welcome. So if you wouldn't mind leaving an Amazon review, good, bad, indifferent, anything like that, believe it or not, like reviews allow me to keep the book fairly priced. Amazon uses an algorithm. And so when they know people are reading and responding to certain content, it basically flags to them that this is something that they want to continue to keep competitively priced because they want to move more of those units, right? So I never knew what reviews did. And again, even if it's a bad 1-star review, it doesn't matter, right? Like, be honest with me. But reviews for independent authors are huge because otherwise Amazon gets to control more of the price and more of what's done, and it's hard to get it in people's hands. We don't have big publishing companies. So thank you again for even just supporting it and being open-minded to it.
Yeah, no, we've got it, the book of the month, and yeah, we're very excited about it. It's been a huge hit so far, so hopefully we can keep it going.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys, and hopefully today was indicative. I will answer every damn question you guys have to the best of my ability.
We appreciate it. It's the sign of a true badass when you stay 20 minutes after the time you were supposed to, just for the love of the game. That's awesome. Appreciate the hell out of you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a great day, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah. Bye.